Imagine this, a castle, tall in the French countryside, shrouded by thick fog on a damp morning. Inside, the air is heavy, not just with the scent of damp stone and old wood, but with something far darker. There's a secret in this castle, a secret so twisted it would shock even the darkest corners of history. Imagine me telling you that this place, once a symbol of affluence and power, also saw the most unthinkable, unimaginable atrocities that had ever been committed throughout medieval Europe. But the most chilling part about the story is not the grotesque acts themselves, but in who did them. A man celebrated for being heroic, a warrior and a saint, just as Joan of Arc would lead many more into battle. At least that was Gilles de Rais outside of the walls of his castle. Inside, something evil reigned. That man's name, Gilles de Rais. Gilles de Rais, the most influential and wealthiest of all, had everything a knight could dream of owning. Lands, power, titles. But behind all this grandeur, there was a gradual descent into madness. Inside his own castle, in Tiffauges, France, in the early 15th century, de Rais would make a turn from being a war hero to being one of history's most notorious serial killers. De Rais started by seducing girls and women, promising them a job, bread, or at least shelter in his fortress. This was especially true for poor villages, which had lost all hope. Thus, any little opportunity would lure them. They did not know their nightmare was where they headed. Once entering the dark gates of the castle, there was no room for negotiation. The descriptions of those who survived, that is, those who luckily managed to run away, read like a real horror story. His victims were tortured, mutilated, and subjected to unimagined terrors. The walls of his castle became silent witnesses to acts of brutal violence that would have made even hardened felons shudder. The accounts described de Rais dressing up his victims in the finest clothes and, after showing no trace of remorse whatsoever, subjecting them to the most disgusting kind of ritualistic abuse in chambers. And it did not stop there, as his crimes were nothing short of ritualistic in nature, having dark, twisted ceremonies designed to invoke supernatural powers. De Rais was one who firmly believed that, with the sacrificing of innocent lives, one could conjure up demons for the receipt of eternal powers. These ghastly acts did not once or twice occur, but over an extended period, time seeing his depravity on a full-scale rise each passing day. These villages that surrounded his castle lived in fear of him. Parents hushed in fear one of their children being taken. Young girls never returned home. The disappearance of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of women and children went unnoticed by the authorities. Why? Because de Rais was a man of status and wealth, thus having the power to silence any person who came close to discovering the truth. But what if the evil is beyond boundaries, and power can't save one from the aftermath of his misdeeds? It was only when the actions of de Rais became too extreme to be ignored, even by corrupt officials, that the truth was finally revealed. It was the confessions of his own servants and other witnesses that finally sealed his fate. When finally arrested, tried, and convicted, it was discovered that he had tortured and killed more than 140 children, with some estimates being far higher. The most salient aspect was that Gilles de Rais had been one of Joan of Arc's most trusted allies. He fought gallantly in the French army, which helped them secure victory against the English. He once was a man looked up to, full of honor and faith. But somewhere along the way, the lust for power and darkness consumed him. Where there was once a hero, now stood a demon. His downfall was inevitable, for he had crossed the line even time could not erase. His trial was very public, and confessions were obtained by torture. He was condemned to death despite his nobility, and, in 1440, Gilles de Rais was hanged and then burned. The tragedy of his story lies not in the acts themselves, but in the transformation of a hero into a monster. His castle, once a symbol of glory, would now be remembered as the place where innocence was destroyed and the dark side of humanity was brought into reality. What does Gilles de Rais's story teach us? It painfully reminds us that darkness does not always wear a villain's face. Many times it wears the mask of power, respect, or even admiration. We are so quick to judge people, always based on what we can observe, and think that a person who has power or is well off cannot commit evil. But the truth is, if not checked, even the noblest of hearts can be corrupted with power. This story is not a horror story. This is a wake-up call for all of us. It asks us to look deeper into the system which allows such terror to breed. Gilles de Rais did not start as a villain, yet he turned out to be one. Why? Because he allowed his ego and hunger to control. We must learn to guard our hearts against the same destroying forces, whether they take the form of uncurbed ambition, pride, or a sense of ourselves as being above reproof. I want you to think about this. How often do we put individuals up on pedestals, thinking that somehow their success, their power, or status protects them from corruption? Maybe it's time we stop looking the other way and start digging deeper into what's really hiding under the rug. What do you think we could learn from Gilles de Rais' story? How will we try to avoid repeating history in the modern world? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your reflections. Thank you for watching, and remember, history is not just a story of the past, but a mirror for the present. Stay vigilant, stay aware, and don't let the darkness creep in unnoticed.